A revolution that executed its king now prepared to crown a new emperor. Beneath the vast vaulted ceiling of Notre-Dame, silence replaced rebellion. Before nobles and clergy, Napoleon Bonaparte stepped forward with calm authority. The imperial crown rested nearby, heavy with history, power, and contradiction. No divine right summoned him to rule, only ambition sharpened by years of war. In a single deliberate motion, he lifted the crown before the watching crowd. He placed it upon his own head, claiming destiny without seeking permission. France watched as a general transformed himself into Emperor of the French. Liberty had promised equality, yet power had quietly rebuilt a throne. But empires are never born in cathedrals. They rise from chaos and conflict. Just years earlier, France had trembled beneath revolution, fear, and terror. The monarchy had fallen, and blood had flowed through the streets of Paris. Governments collapsed almost as quickly as they were assembled. Fear and uncertainty defined the fragile and exhausted republic. Amid this instability stood a young artillery officer with piercing focus. Napoleon was not born to rule France. He was shaped by upheaval. Corsican by birth, an outsider by accent, he learned to adapt early. He studied warfare obsessively, mastering strategy with relentless discipline. While politicians argued over ideals, he calculated angles and outcomes. Opportunity often hides within disorder for those bold enough to see it. France needed victories in battle to survive the monarchies surrounding it. Across Europe, kings prepared vast armies to crush the revolution. In this crisis, Napoleon saw not danger, but a path upward. At Toulon, he seized his first true command with ruthless precision. The thunder of cannon fire announced the arrival of a new force in France. At just 24 years old, Napoleon commanded artillery with calm precision. He positioned cannons not with fury, but with cold mathematical clarity. Where others saw smoke and chaos, he saw precise angles and opportunity. Victory at Toulon earned him rapid promotion and serious attention from Paris. But in revolutionary France, visible success could be as dangerous as failure. Political factions rose and collapsed with alarming speed and violence. The same crowds that cheered triumph could demand executions days later. Napoleon understood quickly that survival required far more than talent. He aligned himself carefully with leaders while guarding his independence. When royalists threatened the fragile government in Paris, he acted decisively. Cannons were placed at close range against insurgents in narrow streets. The blast of grape shot scattered rebellion in a single brutal afternoon. Order was restored swiftly, and the government remembered his name. France did not need gentle leaders. It demanded force and control. Napoleon learned early that power rewards those willing to move first. Soon he was granted command of the struggling and weakened army of Italy. The soldiers were underpaid, undersupplied, and dangerously discouraged. He addressed them not as victims of neglect, but as future conquerors. He promised them glory, wealth, and a permanent place in history. Then he delivered victory after victory against numerically superior forces. His movements were fast, unexpected, and relentlessly aggressive in execution. He divided enemy coalitions carefully and crushed them separately. Europe began to realize this young general was no temporary accident. Each triumph strengthened France and elevated his growing reputation. With every campaign, Napoleon moved closer to something greater than command. In Italy, Napoleon transformed hungry soldiers into a disciplined army. He marched them swiftly across mountains once thought impassable by generals. Battles were won not by size alone, but by speed and surprise. At Lodi and Arcole, his presence turned hesitation into bold momentum. He fought near the front lines, close enough for bullets to find him. Victories brought spoils of war, and spoils secured lasting loyalty. France celebrated him as the rising military savior of the Republic. Yet, ambition rarely rests satisfied with applause and admiration. He negotiated treaties as confidently as he directed artillery fire. In Egypt, he sought not only conquest, but enduring legacy. The campaign faltered strategically, yet his image remained carefully preserved. Back in France, the government weakened under corruption and division. The Directory offered stability, but lacked decisive authority. France needed renewed strength, and Napoleon understood the timing. In 1799, he returned quietly from Egypt to a restless nation. Politicians whispered of reform while he prepared for decisive takeover. The coup of 18 Brumaire unfolded with quiet and calculated efficiency. Legislators protested loudly, but soldiers forcefully cleared the chamber. The Republic did not collapse entirely. It was carefully rearranged. Napoleon became first consul, the most powerful man in France. He promised order, unity, and protection of revolutionary gains. Many welcomed him as a necessary shield against renewed chaos. But concentrated power rarely disperses itself willingly or voluntarily. Laws were reformed, institutions strengthened, and dissent steadily reduced. France had traded instability for firm control under a single will. As first consul, Napoleon moved swiftly to consolidate his authority. He centralized government power and placed loyal allies in key positions. The Bank of France stabilized a shattered and deeply fragile economy. New schools trained administrators to serve the reorganized national state. Most enduring was the civil code that would permanently carry his name. It promised equality before the law and protection of property rights. Yet it also reinforced hierarchy and restricted certain civil freedoms. France prospered under restored order, and many embraced renewed stability. Beyond its borders, Europe refused to accept his expanding dominance. Coalitions formed again, determined to end his growing influence. At Marengo and later at Austerlitz, his armies crushed opposition. He maneuvered forces with precision that stunned rival commanders. Austerlitz became a masterpiece, studied by generals for generations. Emperors and kings retreated before a former artillery officer. With each triumph, his confidence deepened steadily into certainty. In 1804, the final transformation of his rule formally began. The Republic would no longer contain his expanding ambition. A plebiscite approved the creation of a powerful new empire. France had voted, yet the choice felt increasingly symbolic. In Notre-Dame Cathedral, ceremony replaced revolutionary fury. Before Pope Pius VII, the imperial crown awaited its bearer. Napoleon lifted it, without hesitation, before the assembled court. He placed it firmly upon his own head, publicly claiming destiny. The general of the Republic had become Emperor of the French. Power had completed its arc from violent uprising to empire. As emperor, Napoleon reshaped Europe according to his deliberate strategic design. Borders shifted across the continent as old dynasties fell from power. New kingdoms were created, each bearing the unmistakable mark of his authority. But empire demands constant victory to justify and sustain its authority. In Spain, fierce resistance bled his armies through relentless guerrilla warfare. In Russia, winter proved far deadlier than any opposing general he faced. The Grande Armée retreated through snow, starvation, and crushing despair. Alliances strengthened steadily against the man once thought unstoppable. At Waterloo, fate met ambition. On a rain-soaked and chaotic battlefield, exiled to a distant island, he watched silently as the vast empire he built dissolved completely. If you enjoy exploring history beyond the myths, consider subscribing for more documentaries like this. And as always, thank you for watching.